Auzubillahiminash-shaytanir-rajeem, Bismillahir-Rahmanir-Rahim, Assalamualaikum, ji ayanu, Pukhair agale, ni hao, chunashume, washmale, ohaya genzaimes, guten Morgen, hola, bonjour, privyet, kaifa hal, hale shuma chatore, ahlan wa sahlan, marhaba, abuna, mucho gracias, swabio, bhalli kare aya, hosh gal din anayo sayo, Kuya Mora Chivato Chi Haljut Kalimera, and a very warm welcome to everybody who's tuned into PTV World and watching World. This morning, I happen to be Shahzad Hassan Khan, and with me, I'm very lucky to have been once again joined by the same colleague I've loved working with the most, ladies and gentlemen. She happens to be Miss Hajar Sati. Hello Hajar, Assalamu Alaikum. How are you feeling today?
Walaikum Assalam, Jazakallah Khair. Thank you so much for introducing me, Shahzad. So it's summer season and we're seeing that there are a lot of blockbusters, Hollywood movies coming across the cinema halls, and you were pretty excited for the Tom Cruise thriller movies.
Yes.
But the news has been around the corner, especially with regards to Hollywood, that there's a strike that has been going on, right? There was this Oppenheimer cast.
Yes. They walked out before the screening.
That they walked out of the screening, especially in the London premiere. And there are two unions that are actually striking them. And one of the main talking points on which they are striking is the artificial intelligence and the pays. So big studios, they do not want to pay the screenwriters that much because of the artificial intelligence. And you can type something on the ChatGPT and it can generate so many pages. Yeah, and you remember we were also worried about, what is going to happen with our jobs in the first place. But I think ChatGPT cannot replace human emotions, right? Because human has a very humanizing touch. No one likes to listen to a very metallic sort of conversation which is coming from the AI chatbots. And Hollywood productions have already slowed down. So there are a lot of actors, A-category actors, who've also started this, joined this strike. George Clooney is one. So is Nick Jonas. Jonas Brothers have also joined this strike. And they're also saying that the studio bosses, they're earning a lot of money and they're not paying that much to the screenwriters. So before that, the script writers, they used to go onto the sets, they used to acclimatize themselves with the actors, with the settings. But now, since the strike happened, they had been reduced off, their wages has been reduced off. There's a lot of going on inside the Hollywood. And last time in 1960s, it was led by one of the former president of the United States of America, Ronald Reagan.
Yes.
And Hollywood suffered $2 billion of losses. And with the entertainment industry, since you're linked with it, Shahzad, so you can also relate that there are a lot of other industries that are also flourishing. So for example, hotel business, because the cast is staying there. So is the hospitality business, the food and whatnot, right? And when the sets get too famous, they are converted into very touristic spots, right? Like Harry Potter sets, yes, the Artugul set, whatnot, right? And people are saying because of this Hollywood strike, California will suffer a lot.
And in addition to that, Hajar, so, I believe that I would take you to ICC, the International Cricket Council, because they've set the precedents right. So what they've done is that they've come up with how they have not just proposed, but they've made sure that, each country is actually going to pay the same amount of match fee, which is being paid to men and women in the first place. And we have spoken about it. And, even with cricket, there's a lot of hospitality industry which is involved and there are a lot of other stakeholders to it. But in addition to that, I think when we look at the Hollywood celebrities, maybe the Jonas Brothers or Nick Jonas himself or other celebrities, I think that they're living life, so them complaining that they're being underpaid is something which confuses me, that probably they're kind of making sure that for any other actor who's out there who's given us more hit films might be paid more. For example, Dwayne Johnson happens to be one of the highest paid actors ever. And not just that, we come down to Asia, right after Dwayne Johnson's, we have in our neighboring countries the highest paid actors. So I think for them to kind of have this strike might particularly be on that, that there needs to be equality amongst the distribution of the assets or the funds.
Right, but they are actually backing the campaign in which the screenwriters feel that they are being undermined by the big bosses.
They are being.
Yes, of course they are. Because since you are linked with the entertainment industry, and you might know that the screenwriters are already not that much highly paid, right? It's a very laborious job, it's a very creative job, but it doesn't pay that much. And of course, huge celebrities coming in backing out this campaign. There's this standoff because the two unions, they're protesting together. There's American Actors of the Guild and then there's a Screenwriters Guild of America which are coming together. Some people are saying that it may take this strike to go till September, but I think that's a very interesting conversation which we need to have, and we need to do a proper show on it.
And while Oppenheimer is out there, they were premiering, there was another film which was coming out. So I think that, it can be a marketing gimmick to make sure that, that there's more reach to their films. But then, you know, while we are at it, and you know, while we have spoken about it, about screenwriters and you know, people who work for screenplay and people who are behind the camera, most of the time you're right, you know, over here in our industry as well, because people who are in front of the camera are given most of the time a lot of importance is being given to them. But not just that, I think directors, producers and script writers in these days have been celebrated quite a lot. But for all of those other people, may it be the boom operator, may it be the cameraman, may it be any other individual who's working, may it be the editor himself, you know, people do not appreciate their services. Which is why, you know, do you remember that one day you actually asked me that, you know, how do we translate a signal, you know, so I said, or probably an indicator, ishara, right? So what I would want you to kind of define for us.
I don't think so. You remembered that it was not ishara.
Lapak japak ke, you know, something like that.
Ishara dayan by.
Yeah. So what I wanted to ask you today was that, you know, how would you categorize a bichara? You know, so that's something which I wanted to talk about. So bichara can be from any walk of life, but who do you think is a bichara in today's world?
I mean, do you want me to explain it in my perspective?
Yes, obviously in your perspective, and not very emotional, because obviously this bichara context is not very literal, but you know, at times people do not have that understanding of the situation. They can obviously do well. So I think for me, people who certainly do not understand how and where the life is going and where the world is going, and then coming out and trying to be just, you know, incomplete, God forbid, in their understanding, is somebody who I label as a bichara.
Right, that's very true, and I also label someone as a bichara who doesn't get justice. Since you were talking about equality, so I don't believe in that much equality. I believe in justice, because that is a more, I believe, wholesome concept, and a lot of people are focusing on equality nowadays, but it does not always yield a very good product or results in the first place, right? So I believe that someone who doesn't get justice is a bichara, but since it's also International Justice Day and we are going to talk more about it, but why not start with the news first?
Exactly, why not start with the news, but certainly, you know, me myself at my home, I think that I'm a bichara.
I knew where the conversation was going.
I am a bichara too as well, and a lot of people over here are smiling in my studios. Let me just take a good look around. So I think we have a lot of bicharas over here, but for everybody who's out there, ladies and gentlemen, towards the end of the day, it's for the people to kind of understand what responsibility they have for themselves. You know, that's what we call self-love, that, you know, that you feel responsible for making your own self happy, for making your own self understand how life is and where it's taking you, and you understand the challenges, accept them, and make sure that you have a resolve to kind of fight back, to give that guard. So without any further ado now, because I might not hear my producer and she might be shouting now that, okay, we need to move on towards news. So ladies and gentlemen, top stories coming up. Haja, why don't you take the lead?
Right. So the Global Women Awards were held in London. There were 2 nominations from Pakistan: Global Man of the Decade, Dr. Muhammad Amjad Saqib, and Global Women Inspiration Award, Huma Fakhr. Both nominations for Pakistan have won in their categories, and that's a huge congratulations to both of these people. And I've certainly met Dr. Muhammad Amjad Saqib, and his work inspires me a lot, because he was a bureaucrat. He was doing very fine in his career, but he left his career and he wanted to make sure that he wanted to work for the humanity out there. And because of his good work, because of his philanthropic activities, he had built a huge name for himself. And such kind of people who are not, I would say, not very thirsty for the fame, rather they want to really work for the people out there, for the downtrodden class, for the marginalized class, because his work particularly specializes in the housing segment.
Exactly, and that's exactly when you win, ladies and gentlemen, when you understand that you're not working for the money, but rather for your passion, for the betterment of the people. All of these things are actually added contributions to that. And everybody who's actually worked hard day in, day out, made sure that they're not going to leave any stone unturned, are the people who've been blessed with the best of the blessings as well by Allah Almighty. Because Allah Mia actually tells us that, you know, you put in your hard work, leave the rest to me, and that's the power of faith. Moving on, where now Carlos Alcaraz, a good news for him, ladies and gentlemen, when he defeated 7-time champion Novak Djokovic to claim his first Wimbledon title, shattering the Serb's dream of a record equaling 24th Grand Slam crown. The 36-year-old Serbian had been indestructible on Wimbledon's center court for a decade, but he finally met his match as he ran out of ideas to stop young gun Alcaraz from hurling towards the title. World number 1 Alcaraz recovered from dropping the first set and saving a set point in the second to come through 1-6, 7-6, 6-1, 3-6 and 6-4. It was the second major for the 20-year-old Spaniard following his Open US title last year, as he became Wimbledon's 3rd youngest men's champion. Wow, what a good news for him. Imagine, and that too against Novak Djokovic, who've been undefeatable or indefeatable for the longest period of time in the history of Grand Slam.
That's very true, and since Wimbledon is such a huge event, so there are a lot of celebrities which are also going and walking into that court and watching that tennis playing. And my sister is a huge fan of the tennis.
Really?
She also plays tennis.
Wow.
Yes. So I think congratulations to Alcaraz, because that was a very close match. My sister was watching that match, and she was also telling me what was going on. But let's now move on to very interesting conversation.
From sports to education?
Yes,
Okay.
yes. Because I think they both are very integrated concepts.
True.
And I think there is a need to shift our paradigm, especially because we focus a lot on the rote memorization, rote learning and whatnot, and we need to incorporate the paradigm of sports into our academia, because this is how children grow up. And also, especially, I do remember the time when I was in my matriculation and in the FSC. I think that was most stressful time of the year, because everyone was coming down and breathing on your neck and telling you that this
Number
is
lene number.
yes, and if you don't do anything, you are not going to get into good university, your career would be ruined, or the years of your education will go somewhere down the pipeline. So there's a lot of pressure at that time, right? So
and Haja, in addition to that, for whatever I studied in matriculation or in my FSC grades, ladies and gentlemen, I certainly do not see any application of that in my entire life as of now.
All of these
So
theorems,
obviously when we come down to the basics from grade 1 till 8, I think that it has contributed majorly, for me to read, write, comprehend, do whatever. But what do we take out of theorems? What do we take out of, integration? What do we take out of, I mean, there might be a lot of people who might have taken help from it because, they were in relative fields. But unfortunately over here, we certainly need to speak about it. But not that unfortunate. I think what we certainly need to focus on is that a lot of people, we've been speaking about brain drain, but, a lot of people go outside to study, to get the best education so that they can come back and contribute. So what we really need to talk about, Hajar, today is that for any student to kind of attend matriculation and FSC and then apply abroad is a better solution, or do you think that they can convert even if they are in matriculation and they pass and then they move on to A levels? Which one's better? And then when we talk about SAT examinations or other examinations which are applicable in all the other universities, I think we have the right person over here with a lot of experience under her belt. Ladies and gentlemen, we're very lucky that we've been joined by somebody who happens to be a teacher trainer herself. She's a freelance content writer, she's a school magazine chief editor, and she's been working day in, day out to make her name as vibrant because of the fact, ladies and gentlemen, she's over here, and she is Ms. Khutaiba Fayaz. Hello, assalamu alaikum, good morning, how are you?
Walaikum assalam. Such a detailed and elaborated intro by you. I'm really humbled and honored that you have introduced me in such a respectful way.
Thank you so much for joining us. Wonderful to have you. So what do you want us to refer to you, ma'am, teacher, or Ms. Khutaiba?
You can call me anything. I'll prefer to be a teacher because that is somebody who I am.
Exactly. So ma'am, I think let's get started with that. Obviously, so Hajar has highlighted a few very important points, and so let's get the conversation started. And we have had that unfortunate conversations quite a lot of times. Now let's move on to how we can build up better. Whatever education you might have, whatever qualification we might have, people are looking forward to more avenues and exploring. And world these days is a global village. So for anybody to be in matriculation, do you think it's difficult for them to, after matriculation, FSC, apply for abroad? And then even in their first, second, third semester, they're taking time to understand, how their education system works. Do you prefer that O levels and A levels is best if you are planning to kind of apply into universities abroad?
Look, there is no specific yardstick on which, we can just generalize all the students.
Okay.
Because there are always some exceptions, right? So there are students who do wonders after their matriculation and FSC.
Thank you so much. Yeah.
And, and there are still some students, from Cambridge stream, but they don't do that well. So yeah, as far as their curriculum, their studies, their SLOs, everything is concerned, they are totally apart. And yes, I'll give a margin to the Cambridge stream that yes, that is what I think is better, because when students go abroad, they face a lot of trouble.
Yes. And thank you so much for highlighting that, because I'm very sorry, it's a very generic statement, but that's something which I've seen within my own class and my own grades.
Go ahead.
And that is that, for gentlemen who were in O levels and A levels, one, obviously they came off from very well-off backgrounds because they were able to afford that education system, and the students or those friends of mine weren't really focused on their education. They had a wonderful setup, dad had a factory or a shop or something, and they were in that process. But on the contrary, you know, people who had faced challenges while achieving that sort of education in matriculation and FSC were always the kind of students who would overachieve. And that's something which I see now, even that, you know, that they're performing very well. If we are to put a contrast in the people who have been into Cambridge education system or in matriculation, why do you think that difference exists? Is this because of the walk of life you come from, or how your family is, or do you think that it has always been an individual responsibility for any student to outperform?
I guess that goes with the mindset and the scenario, the background, and there are so many factors who contribute in it.
Okay.
And most importantly, the commitment of a student and the determination.
Okay.
How focused he or she is to achieve their goal, and what do they really want to achieve from the life.
Okay, that's wonderful.
That's wonderful, and also I feel that the people or the students who are coming from the OA level background, they have good analytical skills as compared to kids who are coming from the matriculation. Obviously, that's also a generic statement.
Thank you for saying that.
Yeah, I can't back it up with the proper research.
No,
in the first place.
that is a fact actually.
Yes.
Because when we go for teachers training, we attend so many workshops, seminars, and everything. We are
cognizant of this fact, yes?
Yes, we are we have to endorse each and everything in our lesson planning.
True.
That we have to focus on the skill development.
Right.
We don't have to just hamper them ki, okay, we don't have to go for the spoon feeding, or we don't
Right.
have to just tell them, okay, go for the rote learning or do that.
Yes.
Sometimes they have to do the research, sometimes most of the time they do their creative work.
Yes.
So you cannot say that it's just one book and they have to just learn it.
Yes.
Yeah.
There are so many things
They have
which
to
they
Thank
have
you so much. Thank you so much for saying
understand
that.
that concept and then make sure that then they attempt that question or
Exactly.
work according to that. But then let's come to the SAT exam, which is not a very easy exam to take, because especially the English words that I still remember, they were so difficult to memorize, and it was all rote learning in that in the first place, right? So as a teacher, what do you recommend we need to do if you want to go for the SAT? Because then it converts into the GAT test, right? And if you want to apply for the Fulbright scholarship, GAT is a must.
And I was always looking for options where, I certainly didn't have to kind of go through the SAT exam. I was like,
yes, of course.
I'll childs karke zara kahi admission hasil kar lete hain.
but the advantage of SAT is, like, if you score between 1200 to 1400, so you get the margin beyond 1400, so you definitely get enrolled in the Ivy Leagues university abroad. But if you score between 1200 and 1400s, even then, if not A category, then even B category, they offer you a good scholarship. So there is no rocket science that has to be applied.
But it's so easy, it's multiple choice questions only.
Students have to be immaculate in their grammar. That's
So,
it.
we have had students over here on this show who've actually scored, I think, almost 99%, and that student now, alhamdulillah, he's got his own tuition academy online and he's doing wonders. But I have couple of questions. We might have to bring you a little backtrack as well over here.
Sure.
And that is that, when we speak about, or if we are to compare in between matriculation and the board examinations or the Cambridge, what I've understood in my own experiences was that, with matriculation, it's always reproduction, rather than having a better understanding of a concept, because there was
Yes.
hardly any concept out there which they were trying to teach us. Either it was physics, maths, or chemistry which had concepts, but they were so unable to explain it to us in our education system that they wanted us to reproduce. And when we speak of Cambridge, it is more about applied knowledge. It is more about what you take out of it, and whatever you were able to reproduce in the examination, if you had a better understanding, you will get good grades. Do you think that this is a fair line to draw in between matriculation, FSC, and Cambridge examinations?
I agree with you. Somehow
Partially.
Partially.
Yeah, that's what the face expression tells me.
But I'm just about to, no offense to anybody, but I'm just about to, mention few of the factors which are, the cause of, this integration,
Yep.
or you can say the segregation,
Yep.
the main segregation, basically. So the teachers, first of all, when the Cambridge systems, they hire the teacher, their focus is that teacher has to be subject specialist.
Okay.
First thing. Then they send their teachers for the training, how the system goes, and what should be their learning outcomes, what is the paper pattern,
Yep.
what are the demands by the principal examiners, and then there is a constant research, I'm not saying there are wonderful teachers who are doing marvelous job in the metric scheme too, but unfortunately there are many who don't go for the trainings. And
Do you
who
think that the higher percentage of teachers in matriculation FSC is of those teachers who do not attend any sort of training, or do you think that
I
there is a higher
guess they are a
percentage
bit
of
reluctant.
teachers? Okay,
There is a
reluctant. Why are they
stubbornness.
reluctant?
Stubbornness in the
चलिए,
attitude
मुझे सारा
that
पता है.
self-absorbed.
That
Yes.
gentleman or lady unfortunately cannot be a teacher who actually claims
Exactly,
that I know everything.
because learning is an ongoing process.
Yes, it's a
So
two-way process.
each day you learn.
That's true.
I'm here and I've learned something. You know, initially when the
Thank you so much. We're learning quite a lot too.
thank you so much. So you can't just say that you just there's a full stop and then I'm so good at that. And the other thing I wanted to mention, like you mentioned that the curriculum was stagnant. Yes, that was another factor.
एक ही चीज़ रही.
But back in 2021, they introduced their entirely different pattern of paper. But my reservation when they introduced it, it was like they introduced it all of a sudden. In Cambridge system, when they come up with a, there's a new paper pattern, they give at least 2 years
Okay.
to the teachers to plan their resources,
Wonderful.
to just design their learning outcomes, learning objectives, and then to execute those lessons in their class. So the student gets
So it's not a surprise for a student.
exercise daily,
Right.
and then it's not a surprise.
True.
So the result is not affected by because of the paper pattern.
Exactly,
Right.
but in addition to
Yes.
that, one small thing which I wanted to add over here, and that is that that the world has, even over here in the private institutions, I've seen that they've moved on to not having examinations now. Rather, what they would do is that they would assess a child, how the child kind of functions in a class, how many objects he or she remembers, just at a very junior level. And this is something which I think has been very beneficial, not to have that contrast in between children, whether who's performing well and who's not. So they've come down to percentages rather than grades and positions and whatnot. Okay, you were able to achieve 91%, for example, or 88% or 52%. And having said so, I believe that this is a better approach. Do you think that as a teacher, rather than taking examination at the end of the year, because I do not remember what I studied in matriculation now, or probably in FSC, what's the point of having examination at that point of time, or probably better understanding of what I'm going to study tomorrow? But just in a brief nutshell, do you think that it's better to have assessments or rather examinations?
Assessments are good. You get checklists, like that students are standing there.
Yeah.
But again, we cannot say that that is the final list where
ये
we
बच्चे को
can.
सब आता है.
Yes, we can't judge them.
Yeah.
True.
But again, there are
That's what I
different.
want. Nobody's judging anybody.
But we can't, as a nation, we're
Alternative
not
will
that
exist, yes.
disciplined. This is the dilemma that exists with us.
Yeah.
So most of the time when students, especially in the private school sector, when they enter and there are assessments, some are very serious about it. But some take them okay. They happen every month, so
Cuddling,
they are very chill
Casual
about it,
about
and
it,
they're
yes.
very casual, and they don't take them seriously.
true.
And when the final assessment come, whom we call formative assessment, so then they study a lot and they attempt them very seriously and achieve very good grades.
True.
Yes.
So yeah, I think that this trend should carry on,
Yeah.
because
Or probably have the same pressure every month before their assessment.
Yeah, and that's a very interesting debate about having the grades and marking them and not having the exams, because I don't think so there's a very viable alternative as to not taking the exams in the first place, especially for the teacher to assess a student. And
this is a very good point you have raised, because when we go for the teachers training now, and whenever we start a term, we always go for the diagnostics.
yes.
We give 2 weeks.
Crash courses are on, everybody's going in till 7 p.m., everybody's studying. Please continue.
Okay, so we give some time to the teachers to understand the case history of each and every learner,
Right.
Yeah.
because they all are different, as you mentioned. So we can't just categorize them initially. They would be average scorer, they would be low scorer, and they will be
But I'm glad that that I went to a wonderful educational institution,
Right.
and that institution actually asked us whether how good our teachers were. And I think that's something which really needs to be applied in
That's
our schooling, in our university systems as well. Do you think the teachers are really happy about assessing? Because every time we've assessed a teacher, you know, she's still continued to make us study. So we always made sure that we're going to have the negative remarks, you know, all of our entire class about that one particular teacher we weren't really happy about, even though that she was great about teaching, but we weren't able to succeed in her exam. And we would always give a very negative feedback about her in the teacher assessment software. But she would always continue to teach us even in the next class as well. And we like, yeah.
I can recall my university days as
Yeah, but
well.
there is
There is always
anonymity
one
element in it.
teacher
Yeah.
who,
Sure, go
who
ahead.
So
you
do
know,
you think that students should be assessing teachers, or do you think that they always
it should
will
be,
have a bias?
It should be. They should be having the right to send their feedback, and
लेकिन
it
हमारा bias
happens.
तो होता है ना as a student के यार teacher बस ये बहुत मुश्किल subject पढ़ा रही है.
Actually, students do not like those as teachers, especially who are very honest with their duties.
That's
So what
true,
would you
that's
say about yourself as a teacher then?
Whenever my complaint has gone, I'll be very honest. It was always like, you know, she gives more task to write, because my subject is like that.
Yeah.
I deal with English, so students have to,
they
especially
have to.
boys, have to write creative writing and narratives. When it comes to this, so they don't like to write
And in
stories.
current times, I think it is the most difficult job because people these days make so many spelling mistakes, unfortunately, because of this texting and SMS and
I
whatnot.
don't think so. It's a very gigantic task to deal with, because
True.
ChatGPT is here, artificial intelligence is there, and I think educators are not really happy about it. But I also want to revert to very important aspect of the SAT exam, which is the exam fee. I think it costs around $60, and there's this gap. Yes.
$65 and $40 more you have to pay.
Oh my God! So I mean, just see
$105.
that this creates a bifurcation between the poor kids who cannot afford that and the rich kids. So that creates a lot of elitism in this context, right? So what about the kids or the students, especially in the Pakistan, so the background, or the people of the third world countries who can't afford such a huge fee price in the first place, right? I don't think so. It's their mistake that they want to give the SAT, but the fee is so high. So what do you recommend? I mean, as a teacher, do you give voice to such voiceless students who can't give the SAT exam in the first place because of the very skyrocketing price?
You're right that you know, sometimes, you know, the cost is so high, but again that is set, you know, to prepare them that if they go to those you know, states,
Yes.
so again those states are very costly.
That's true.
Even though they get the scholarship,
Yes.
but to fulfill the other and to meet the other
Yes.
you know, requirements and basic needs, they need to have a proper, you know,
Bank account, yes.
bank account and certain, you know,
Yes.
amount. So unfortunately, this is something, you know, where we
And
can't.
this is something which is
yes.
only applicable in the in that part of the world where there are developing countries, you know. So that's something which I would want to kind of highlight over here, and would want your intake on that. That, you know, not every, for example, if I am a citizen of England, you know,
Yes,
so if I am applying in an American university, they won't ask me for SAT. You know, they won't ask me for anything. Rather, they would ask me for whatever grades I got in A levels, and they would
Yes,
give me
yes.
their admission in advance. So after A1, I would actually be applying to university, and they'll be like, okay, next year you can join.
Yes.
Why do you think that we've been so unfortunate till now that our students have to apply for SAT? Is it because of our spoken language? Do you think that there's a language barrier, or do you think that they really need to kind of
No,
run a
they
range
demand it from all the countries. You know, like every country have their own special kind of test, because that shows the equivalence of the
You
students.
know, the admission test for universities is fine,
Yes.
but you know, when we speak about SAT, not every country or the students from every country actually has to appear in SAT. So I think that our teachers, or people who are within the system, really need to kind of make sure that they
Yes.
identify
Yes.
that we are smarter students, we are bright students. That why do
Actually-
we have to appear in SAT every time?
You're very right, and you
Thank
have
you.
raised a very good issue. We should speak about it, but unfortunately, we don't. We do not. So you know, the blessed, they get more you know, facilities. If we talk about this thing, yeah, the students who can't afford, we can't be pessimistic with them.
True.
But we tell them there are so many opportunities. They can go for scholarships in Pakistan. There are so many good universities in Pakistan. You know, the King Edward University. LUMS is one of those, but again, LUMS also ask for SAT.
Yeah.
So
Exactly, yes, of course.
NUST they can go for. So
Yeah.
there are so
You go to
many
my university, even they offer scholarships. You know, I've received 3 scholarships over the period of my 4 years. And then obviously, unfortunately, in my
And then in the universities, they get, you know, student exchange programs.
Yep.
So even then they have, you know, options. They can't be just like, you know, okay, we have
student
lost
exchange programs, you get more exposure, but because, you know, you're only going for a semester or 2 semesters, you know, it's not that is going to contribute quite a lot, but the exposure is great.
Of course, and it does not help academically, but since you are a teacher trainer and you might have trained a lot of teachers out there, so what are some of the common weak areas that you recognize in every teacher training, and what are the rectifying steps that you take in order to correct those weak areas in the first place?
weak areas where?
In teachers training, you know, so some common mistakes you see the
classroom
teachers are
management.
making. Yes.
Okay, the first I will say limitation is that not meeting the time.
Okay.
Like a class has 40 minutes, so sometimes teachers are very over ambitious.
Yes.
Okay.
And they bombard the work on the students.
Oh yes.
True.
Oh yes.
And that's how the classroom becomes a chaos.
Yeah.
Right.
And not just that, you know, do you think that it's because of the fact that teacher has a lot of plans, you know, in you know, next few weeks to go somewhere, so she's like, okay, when we complete my lessons, then I'll have a free class, not being very considerate about the students. And then obviously there are different types of teachers.
This is where the empathy comes, na? You were talking about sympathy, bichara initially.
Yeah.
So we shouldn't be, you know, sympathized towards ourselves or towards other. We should be having empathy.
Exactly.
For ourselves
everybody.
and for others too.
So that's one point. Now the second point was that, you know, I was successful enough. Alhamdulillah, I was in fact lucky enough that I was able to study with teachers and professors who would actually give us this liberty that they were like, okay, you don't want to come to class, you know, don't come to the class. I will give you your attendance. It will be 100%, but do not disturb the students who are always willing to study. And that's one thing which has always helped us. Number two, you know, I had a professor, Sir Tariq, if you're out there, alhamdulillah, because I specialized in marketing, and he used to tell us that I do not want you to reproduce anything from the book. What I would want you to is to write or answer a question in a way where you kind of convince your professor that, okay, I have a better understanding of this subject and you'll get good grades. Unfortunately, I've not been able to, you know, see a lot of teachers who would have the same methodology, because that gave me a better understanding of the subject.
Flexibility is what you are really talking about right now. And yes, this is what is lacking. I previously talked about stubbornness in the nature. One thing is mismanagement of time. The other thing is stubbornness. One has to be flexible enough. If my students are not that, you know, happy about writing, I just ask them, okay, just write a paragraph
but
for
still
today.
write.
But write something.
Or probably,
you know,
text me, write a paragraph and text me, something like that.
I don't appreciate texting because they can copy paste, and you know, I don't like those.
Okay, which is why now I have a question for both of you. So I have a question for Haja and for you, ma'am, as well. Now my question, Haja, with you is that, you know, when people out there are teaching, do you think that what they do in their mind is that they kind of go back in time and think about how their teachers were teaching them and then apply the same idea? Because that's exactly how parenting is being done in Pakistan.
That's true.
So they would never think out of the box. They're like, okay, you know, हमारे वालिद ने इस मौके पे क्या किया था तो हम भी वही करते हैं, or the mother. So do you think that the teachers are making this same mistake over and over again, going back in time and thinking how our teachers used to teach us and then applying the same method?
Well, if you ask me, in particular in my case, I do feel some teachers do that, but I do not. Yes, you're inspired by a lot of teachers, professors who taught you good and whose lessons stayed with you after so many years that you have graduated. But I think now with the artificial intelligence and now with the very fastly changing digital era, what I try to do is I incorporate all of these fastly changes, especially into the curriculum. And I think the universities or the school system, they need to be more flexible about the course outlines in the first place, is because the approved course line is dates back to 10 years or 12 years, and there have been so many changes in those 10 or 12 years, right? For example, ChatGPT is a reality. We need to learn to live with that, right? And there are a lot of other things, how the element of virality is so much important nowadays, etc., etc. So I think a good teacher is one that adapts to the changes and makes sure that his student gets all of those which she or he is trying to impart on those students in the first place. But when the university or the school system become not that flexible in order to incorporate those changes, that's where the attention arises, right? And I think we need to address that tension in the first place. But obviously it's good that you are inspired by some professors, because I was inspired by a lot of my professors, and I tried incorporating their lessons and then also with the changing circumstances in the
because
first
I do
place.
believe
Yes.
that, you know, giving somebody the leverage and the luxury and liberty to kind of decide for themselves by their own selves is something which will give them a better understanding of the subject. What's your take on the same question?
I agree with her because students, they are not same.
True.
They have, you know, this generation, Gen Z we talk about,
Yes.
they are really different. Their attention span is really short.
True.
They need something very attractive, filled with activity, energy, agility. If that is not there, they just leave the class. They are so blunt. We used to have pin drop silence in front of our
That's true.
teachers,
That's true.
Yeah.
even at university level.
And teachers
But-
used to say, come in and say, pin drop silence, and you know, everybody would be silent. like,
And
"Okay,
teacher
suck
used to
aa
be
gayi."
the Hitler of that time, you know, they could do anything they
Yes,
want to
that's
Yeah.
true.
if they got offended.
Exactly.
But now we have to even daily, you know, change ourselves, daily change our strategies, our methodologies, even our behavior as well.
Exactly.
true.
And this is
So-
exactly the reason why, you know, my hand is actually on my cheeks, because I just remembered my Urdu teacher, Sir Zahir.
Exactly.
You know?
So there are many teachers, I have learned from them. But sorry to say, I cannot apply their teaching strategies
Yeah.
because
Yes.
they asked for the penalization.
True.
And I, being a teacher of these kids, I cannot do with them.
Thank you so much for
Thank
having
you
this
so much.
mindset as well. And, you know, there's certainly with teachers like you know, we have a great future, and, you know, our future certainly lies in your hands as well. I wanted to talk about, you know, the threat which artificial intelligence or softwares like ChatGPT poses to students these days, because my research says that, you know, that unfortunately they might lack in comprehension, they might lack in, you know, even making sentences, and there will be a lot of challenges
That's true.
if unfortunately they are given this facility at a very early age. But someday, inshallah, we'll definitely talk about it. We have to head out towards a short break. So thank you very much, Ms. Khataiba, for
Thank
being
you
with
so
us.
much.
It was lovely to be in conversation with you. And for everybody who's out there, ladies and gentlemen, in the first place, it's always your intent which matters. So if you're out there in a school, if you're a student and you're listening to me, please make sure that you ammi bu ke paise halal karo. theek hai? Okay, we're heading out towards a short break. Don't go anywhere. We'll be right back.
Welcome back, and it's 17th of July, it's Monday, it also happens to be World International Justice Day. And earlier on, when we started our conversation, we were having a very interesting conversation because Shahzad raised a point about the equality, and nowadays you hear a lot about equality, right? Equal rights, equal this, equal that, and then comes the concept of justice, right? So I always prefer justice over equality. But since 17th of July is marked as the World International Justice Day, and the reason why we observe this day is we want to highlight the importance of International Criminal Court in the first place, and to make sure that the justice is served internationally to all of those perpetrators or to all of those who didn't get the justice in the first place. So we are very glad that we have been joined by one of our very favorite guest speaker, who happens to be Justice Khokhar Saab. Assalamu alaikum, and thank you so much for coming here.
Sir, you happen to be advocate Supreme Court yourself. Alhamdulillah, you've had a lucrative career over the span of your life. You've been with Federal Ombudsman. You've seen, in fact, the entire stadium.
From 98 to onwards.
From 98 to onwards, you've seen all the facets of law, how you know, justice is being delivered away in Pakistan, how people do become bicharas because of the fact that justice is denied to them. We've grown up with this very statement that justice denied is, justice
Delayed is
justice
denied.
delayed is justice denied. And that's something which has been very operational over here in the country, unfortunately. And while we speak of it, Pakistan is ranked at 129 out of 140. So we do know how the affairs are. But unfortunately, how do you think that things can actually get better? Because from 1980s, you've been out there. Do you think that you've given it your best and you've tried your best?
Shahzad, three things are very important. One is that it is the basic and fundamental rights to have a good governance in any of country which you are living.
Okay.
Second most important is that you have a right to seek your justice in a timely manner, without any obstacles, and by taking your right in a proper way. this is again your the fundamental rights.
True.
And the third most important is that the rule of law. And the rule of law is that that you are living in a country wherever you are going, there are some rights, there are some obligations, either on the civil justice side, criminal justice side, administrative justice sides, and everybody is there to obey the law, and that is the rule of law. And primarily wherever there is a rule of law, there is a prosperity, there is a good governance, there is a timely deliverance of justice. But unfortunately, since 1947, that our forefathers, they have obtained independence from the Britishers, but unfortunately later on we have not replaced their outdated colonial system. We still keep continuing the criminal justice system start from 1860, the Pakistan Penal Code, and it is going on in Pakistan. We have the complex procedure system of the English that was meant only, I mean, to control the people of the subcontinent. 1898, it is still continuing. We have another outdated system, the Civil Procedure Code 1908, and it keeps going on. And on the commercial side, we have a 1940 Arbitration Act. So you could imagine that now we are living in the 21st century, and we are seeing over here that we have the outdated system. The system is not working, and ultimately there is certain issues, and the people are talking about it, and they are, I mean, they're making criticism on it, and they're right on it. And the primarily responsibility lies with our parliament, the political leaders, and the judiciary as well, being the part of the system.
But sir, let's talk about the international justice system, since it's commemorated. It is commemorated to establish the ICC, International Criminal Court, and we've seen that it's a very biased justice system, right? So a lot of rich countries, they commit a lot of crimes, they violate the victim's right, and then they go scot-free. But ICC is very firm, especially on giving sentences to people who belong to third world countries or not very affluent countries in the first place, right? So this is not a very good dispensation of justice in the first place,
and that
right?
too from an international governing body.
Yes, yes.
Yeah, definitely, and we can quote the example of the occupied Kashmir as well. There is a serious violation committed by the human rights, and many times the people on the Palestine as well over there. So they say there is international politics as well. They make certain institution, and they are using these institution. And if because I have studied the comparative system, the civil justice system and the criminal justice system all over the world, that when they have the money and they have the representation in these institutions, then they are backed by a certain politics or certain I mean agendas and the certain narratives of those countries, and which is keep going on, not in the ICC, but in some in various, I mean the international monetary institutions as well, because they give the money and they think they have the right to interpret what the law is or what the agenda would be. But simultaneously it is important, there are certain institutions over there and they are working somewhere, and they are even in the ICC they have punished the Yugoslavian I mean the genocide over there. So they are doing over there, but the most important thing to our extent, how we see our justice system in Pakistan, because primarily the 99.9% people, they are not dealing with the ICC, they are dealing with the Pakistani district courts, high court, then Supreme Court, how they gauge about it.
And which is why that's something which I wanted to talk about. So allow me to kind of speak my heart out, and I might not be somebody that who should be judging anybody over here on television, and that's not my responsibility as an anchor person. I am somebody who's supposed to ask questions, and you are the person who should give his own opinion or share his own opinion.
True.
So now what I have seen, what the notion is, sir, and that is that that for all of those people who are at the helm of affairs are the people, unfortunately, I'm not speaking specifically about justice system, but elsewhere, that's what the notion we get as Pakistanis, that that they're not the right people who should actually be at the helm of affairs. Reason being, the reference point happens to be that they're not the people who are taking those decisions which will take us or direct us in the right direction. Now, the cause happens to be that people who certainly want to be at the helm of affairs are the people, people who are actually running these institutes happen to be so eager to be at that place that they have politicized that very position and have jeopardized their decision-making ability. How do you think that, inshallah, in days to come, Pakistan will be able to get rid of this jeopardization of their own ability of decision making? Because we want people who can take effective decisions. Okay, decisions can be wrong and right, that's a later part, but not taking any decision is something which is halting our progress.
The big issue is that there is no mechanism, the oversight by the public bodies, number one. Number two issue is that there is no accountability, and the most important thing, there is no transparency, because you talk about if you go somewhere in a government office, you go over there, and if someone is not there, and for the sake of argument, if he is there and he is not resolving the problem, you can't say anything to him. He says, I am above from the law. So, that the problem triggers over there. Okay. So, in that particular situation is wherever, if we compare our system with other system, the people who are there, who have a successful justice system over their country, they done three things. Number one, they have overhauled over whole judicial system, governance, civil, criminal, and everything. They have done it. They made the new legislation. True. Then they made the public bodies as well, oversight mechanism. If you are going even somewhere over there, there is a check on police, there is a check on the government functions, and even there is a check on judiciary by the parliament. The third thing they have adopted and they have employed the best people over there. There is no favoritism, there is no nepotism. If you are a good professionals, you can be over there. In Pakistan, we have a problem. True. And finally, the most important, they have used the technology, the modern technology. They have made the distance between a person and the person who is doing the thing, and the system triggers over there. If you have a complaint somewhere, you have a problem somewhere, the system automatically starts, and the system is monitored by some external sides. And even in some countries, Shahzad, it is very interesting, the people have the right to write the ACRs of the government offices. If there is a public service mechanism, don't need to have the superior officers, he will write your ACR. The public, the people who are living over there, they have a right of ACR. So, must introduce in Pakistan at the level of the district judiciary, the people have a right to say something about the judges, they have the right to say on the police, the executive side, and that may be the part of the after investigation, if they found it true, that the part of their personal file.
Can we do it now?
Can we do it?
Really?
Yeah, we can do it. The parliament, and the primary responsibility, I earlier said that it is our parliament. They should, they should now think over it. 75 years has gone, and still we are, indulging in our basic issues, and we are talking about how to get a meter, how to get register an FIR, how to go for the minor issues of a government authorities.
Sir, gas का मीटर कैसे लगवाना है सर?
वो उसके अंदर कह रहे हैं, if I have a claim against you and I can go in a court, it takes years and years, and the people and the system is exploiting your rights, and resultantly the mafia, they are.
We have had cases where people have passed away, unfortunately, and that's the time when
definitely in high court, district court,
was not dispensed
even
place, yes.
So the important thing is that there are certain responsibilities of our policy makers. And who are the policy makers? Who are the decision makers? Just we and you, just we can say on it, we can speak on it, but ultimately the responsibility lies with the parliament and the judiciary of Pakistan.
One last question before we wrap up this segment. I'm sorry, I'm cutting you, Shahzad, which is about the, for example, he alluded to the fact that there are a lot of backlog of the cases, and it takes a lot of years in order to get the dispensation of the justice. And in some cases, we see that the justice is not served in the first place, right? So, what are some of the reforms that you suggest, especially in the World International Justice Day, to improve our justice system in the first place? And secondly, how can we make sure that the justice is easily served and in more cheaper ways to the marginalized communities who do not have so much amount of the money to afford, such heavy lawyers out there, because their fees very heavy, and they do not have the resources in the first place to deal with it, right?
And in addition to that, how can we get rid of that lower tier and the lower segment where you just arrive outside the court and there will be 10 people asking you, sir, kaun se kiske paas jana? Unfortunately, I have to say this the way here. File dabani hai sir, ya case abhi lagwana hai.
The backlog is a fundamental problem.
True.
And the backlog has certain reasons. I merely pointed out the outdated system, the complex procedure system, the judicial capacity, the infrastructure. Still we have the district court for the last many years in a complex in Islamabad. That shows the priority of our justice system. And the most important thing is that we are avoiding the mechanism which is being adopted by the international community, that is the dispute resolution mechanism. The ADR is very important. Every case should not be brought into the court, but in Pakistan we are going to the court. Even there are so many frivolous litigation in Pakistan. So the case management is very important. The procedure has to be changed. The judicial strength of judges, they to be strained. The capacity has to be strained, and the outdated procedures like the 1898, 1908, they have to be changed, and finally an oversight strong mechanism by the public authorities that if something is not done in accordance with law, he should be prosecuted, and the fair and the transparent appointment in the High Court and the Supreme Court, that is another most
Thank you
important
so much,
area.
sir. And I could have wrapped up with this, the entire show, but I would want to kind of take another minute. I'm very sorry to my producer, and that is that number one, where we actually spoke of it. What I would certainly want to ask you is that if this system is vibrant enough and it's transparent, did you think that we require these oversight committees and whatnot? A 4-member committee either baith jayegi,
Sir,
4 members udhar baith jayegi.
Shahzad, system is not functional and system is not vibrant. I am talking about in a way that if some functionary is not working in accordance with law, then the system has to be there where he can ask someone that you should act in accordance with law.
And one last question, and that is that for you to be in a country where unfortunately at times it's a generic statement and I'm not talking about anybody specifically, and that is that where the FIR is not according to the crime scene.
True.
So unfortunately the FIR is being put in a way where it could contribute towards one person's benefit. How do you think that we can deserve justice that to based on an FIR which is not according to the crime scene? Unfortunately,
I'm giving an example. The first commission constituted in 1954, and it was with the mandate that why the FIR was not registered after 1947. There was a problem pre-partition and there was a problem 1954 as well. And there were certain recommendations, Shahzad, at that. Then another commission was constituted in 1969, and it went on for 2 years, and formally the Chief Justice at that time, Justice Hamood Rahman, they made certain recommendations about justice system and the FIR. Still we are not rectifying the system. Until, Shahzad, we will not rectifying our justice system, and especially if you go on the court in the district courts and even now in the high courts, most of the cases are there, someone is there, my FIR is not registered, and someone is there, I am going over there to the police station, he is not registering my case. So I have suggested as a student of law, because the people sometimes think that maybe there is a false registration of a case and they are trying to arrest their accused. So if we define the offence arrestable and not arrestable, we register the case application every case, and then the prosecution will decide is this man should be arrested or not. So this is the best way to move forward.
Thank you so much, sir, for your time. It's wonderful to have you over here, and then at the same time would like to kind of add over here, and that is that that this one thing which reassures me about my justice system is that at least that the Chief Justice of Pakistan being appointed on merit. So whoever is next in number, that's the gentleman who's going to take over. But then at the same time, what we certainly need to focus on is that that there's been so much of backlogging that that one gentleman in the period of their service can unfortunately not do everything. So they have tried making sure that there's new policies being introduced, the new laws being introduced, and then to somehow curb this menace. But inshallah, in days to come, ladies and gentlemen, since we happen to be a very resilient nation, inshallah we'll achieve it one day on World International Justice Day. Ladies and gentlemen, we were lucky that we were being joined by Khoka Saab. But until next time, we're short on time. My producer is really shouting in my ear now. Until next time, look out yourselves. Good morning. So have a great day.